Hi, this is Christina with Christina West Art. Today I'm going to be doing an intuitive painting. Have a watercolor paper that's 140 weight hot press with Dr. Martin's dyes, and I wanted very deep saturated colors, and I was just going to let this dry, and then I was going to use it as collage pieces. So I'm really just looking for some saturated color. And Dr. Martin's dyes are extremely saturated and they give exquisite color. Now, Dr. Martin's dyes are not light fast. They're better than they were when I was in art school in my 20s. So, what I do is seal them, and that way you keep the intensity. The best way would be to seal the top of the paper, do the Dr. Martin's dyes, and then seal the paint between the layers. And you'll see where I go with this. This wasn't a fully formed idea. It's intuitive painting. As many of you know who've listened to my podcast, my parents studied the Western mystery traditions, and I spent most of half my life, working with shamans and the inquiry of what makes art sacred. So there's actually, gosh, at least 40 years of researching this topic, and maybe maybe over 40 now. And so this is my outdoor studio that I set up last summer, which I absolutely love. It is so freeing to have a studio that you can have a mess and just go out there anytime. And I live in Southern California, so it's nice and warm, or medium most of the time. So it is pretty much a studio that can be used all the time. I also have a studio for my other store, which is in the garage, and it's where I keep my stock. But I also have made that into a painting studio with lights and everything so I can film. And it always looks so nice and pristine when you first start a painting. And I'm using a spray bottle to create a thin layer of water over the entire surface of the canvas. And this is just playing around. This is just my process of trying to enter into the painting, enter into this theme. In a shamanic way, you could say enter into the archetype or the being of Sophia. It's a way to get over the fear of a white canvas. And one of the things that help me and support me in my creativity is working with color. And I just love color. So I love the magentas and the yellows, and I try to keep my canvas in a light mood at the beginning, and then I can go dark as I progress. But I do like starting from the light. And you can see I'm just having a little fun. I'm just doing whatever moves my heart, doing this, doing that. I know that this is just the beginning of a layer. It's just entering into getting your toe wet into this deep well of the Divine Sophia. And I've written about the Divine Sophia, I've done podcasts on the Divine Sophia, I've given workshops and classes and podcasts and Zoom classes, and I did an exhibition in Berkeley in 2000 of an installation of the Divine Sophia with a number of different altars and earth altars. So again, this is a theme that for me is a source of inspiration, a source of creativity, also a source that I can come back to with questions about my life, questions about where I'm going. It's a way for me to use like a foundation stone, like even a worry stone, you could say. You know, if I have something that's not shifting, I can do a piece, mixed media or a painting, and somehow or other, the process of working creatively with a question. I'm a dream teacher, been a dream teacher all my life. My father was a esotericist. He studied the Western mystery traditions, so he taught me dreaming. And I went on to pursue an academic career in dream work and did the JFK Dream Studies program. And also, of course, working with shamans. So I am definitely a dreamer, and dreaming informs me. One of the things, one of the focuses that happens when you work, you know, with shamans, or you're working in a shamanic way or a mystic way, you know, following the tracks of your dreams, is that I'm actually a trained artist. So I went to school and I got my undergraduate and graduate work in arts, in transformational arts and consciousness. So I've stayed within the consciousness framework. Thank gosh that that's come along, right? So we have an understanding of sort of the shamanic implications of art making. So doing a painting sometimes can be like working a dream, doing a dream incubation. And a dream incubation just means that, you know, before you go to bed at night, you say, I will remember my dreams. I will remember my dreams. I will remember my dreams. And then you ask a question, and that's called a dream incubation question. And then when you wake up, you train yourself to be aware in that holy moment of consciousness, because you're actually sliding back into your body when you open your eyes, and see if you can bring back something from the other side. And that in indigenous traditions is called being a walker between the worlds. And we all have this capability. It's natural for us. It's just that we don't, many of us don't pay attention to it or hone it as a skill, because you can become very adept at it. And that's what they used to call adepts, of course. So over time, if you have a lifetime spent working this way, you can see you've developed an intuitive set of skills that are quite difficult to talk about, because you're actually tracking information on levels of consciousness when you're working. So if you didn't know that about me, if I hadn't shared that, you could just say, oh, look, she's doing an abstract painting with some color. But, you know, when you hear the story, there's a different quality of what's arising in the surface plane, in the picture plane, in the composition, in the field, the field of this abstract landscape. So I can remember that I really wanted to stay in the light. And you can see me wiping out and rubbing out. And I have paper towels, and I also have, when I undo the plastic around the canvas, I always tuck that everywhere around where I work, so that I can always grab that and use it when I want to. So I have paper towels and thin plastic wrap. And I'll use that and use that and use that up. So you can see I'm really liking the effect that's happening. And when you sop up some of the dye in the paper towel, it leaves what I call cummy-goey. It's coming and it's going. You don't know if it's arising or dissolving. And I love it. It stays in a field of becoming It hasn't solidified into form yet. And you're sort of working in the becoming of the image. And at this point, you're just trusting your tracking skills that you've developed it in your life as an artist and also as a shamanic practitioner. And again, this is very soothing. This is contemplative arts. I do not have any loud music on. If there's any music at all, most of the time I listen to Gregorian chants or sometimes, beautiful, soft Mozart or jazz, Preservation Hall when I lived in New Orleans. That's when I'm feeling a little spunky. But if I'm doing something like Sophia, something I need to create an atmosphere around myself that supports and elevates my consciousness. So that's extremely important for a contemplative. And as we know, artists are very sensitive to sounds and light. And so at the beginning of a painting, it's so nice to have a clean studio. At the end of a painting, it's not so clean. It's that creative chaos, creative mess, which I am fine with. So just finding my way into this. I do have this speeded up. I think this is ×2. And I could have done this much faster. But I thought for a change, it's nice to just watch a painting develop without the fast forward. Contemplative arts is a slower way of working, and it's nice to have a slower seeing. At the beginning, I have done some speed, but as we get into some of the collage, I've taken the speed off. So as a dreamer, I'm a precognitive dreamer, so I tend to dream the future, which is a time conundrum. How can you dream the future? But the ASD conferences, the Association for the Study of Dreams, the big conferences that I'm a member of and I've gone to for years. I remember at one of the great, it was like a smorgasbord for dream workers, and I was running to and fro to a workshop, and somebody at a table grabbed me and said, hey, enter the contest, enter the contest. And I said, what contest? I was like, am I going to take shamanic dreaming? Am I going to take the Zen Bon? Am I going to take the lucid? Am I going to take shared dreaming? What did you dream last night? They asked. We're doing a contest. Who's the most aware dreamer? Who can guess our, gosh, what were they called? It was like the control group. So they had a certain pictures that they sent out in the field of consciousness. And so I just rattled off what I had dreamt. And, raced to the main event, which was whatever the workshop was that I picked for dreaming. And I won. I won hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who were there that year. And it was a real signpost, from the spiritual worlds, from the archetypes, the world of archetypes or spirit or whatever you want to call it. Jung would call it a synchronicity. To pay attention, to pay more attention to what was arising every day. And I have really fallen down the rabbit hole here. And I'm using a fan brush, which is completely splayed out. I've used it. I've forgotten to wash it. It's dried. But it gives me some fabulous shapes. So you always want to see if you can keep your brushes So I'm knocking some water back into that by tapping a brush. That brush has got water in it, and I'm tapping it. So it's really becoming like a watercolor, and this can be a rabbit hole or a trap that you just can't get out of because you're just moving the same color around the surface of the canvas. And that is white ink and then white Dr. Martin's dye. So I'm not sure if that's the ink or the dye. I have two whites. And you can see I'm fighting the idea of going darker if I'm adding white. I'm still trying to barely go, into any color because light itself, is just pure white light. It's pure when you look at the sun. And then as you start looking at objects, they darken as they reflect or take in the light. And when you start a painting, sometimes, many years in fact, I would paint the surface of the canvas, I would prime it with black because Da Vinci said to start a canvas with black would give you the universe. It would give you the darkness. It would lay the universe of a nothingness over your canvas. So whatever you put on that dark would sort of bloom in the light. So I've moved on now to a wonderful template that I got online that looks like writing, because Sophia is known as holy wisdom. And of course, if we think about wisdom, we come to human beings and we think about speech, that every village has a dialect or a different speech. So my thought was to introduce speech into this amorphous color field, because basically right now it's a color field. And this starts leading me down the path towards a more fully developed idea that takes shape as I go. But I'm still just where I'm at. I'm staying conscious of being here now. I am just here. So I don't have a fully formed idea of where the painting's going. I know that I wanted to do a collage with the saturated pieces of paper, but at any point I can let this go and do something different. So at this point, I'm taking a bold step and, getting opaque paint and now moving on top of this. I've got to start doing layers. You have to, I know all artists know this, that we all talk to ourselves. So I said, all right, Christina, you've got to step forward. You've got to move to the next step, whatever that next step is. And that'll lead you to the third step and the fourth step. But if you just stay in this color field, which is fine. But this isn't the impetus. This isn't the intent. This isn't the internal yearning. There's something else that wants to become, and I'm trying to track that becoming of this painting. So when you go opaque, it's a step down in the laws of light, because if you stay in a watercolor, you're just moving color moving on a surface of that canvas. it's still very elemental. The shamans would say the elemental beings can move in and out of that color. And when you introduce acrylics, acrylics are a plastic, which I have to say is a dead paint. Now, I've talked to many shamans about this over the years because why use a dead paint? Why not stay with like Duo Aqua Oils, which is a water-based paint? They actually, Winsor Newton learned how to lift a water-based paint, an oil into a water-based paint, which is really an alchemical miracle. You know, it's water cleanup. So you can use oil paints in your house, put your painting out in the garage or the studio at night, and you've cleaned up your brushes and nothing reeks of oil paint in the house. It's just so liberating after years and years and years, because I adore oil paints. I love the viscosity, the thickness, the strength of the color, the way the way it's like butter on a canvas. But as a teacher of videos and so forth, I've switched back to acrylics, which I used for years in my youth when I was in school. And it's a great way because it dries so fast. But one of the things that many of the shamans have responded is that depends on the intent of the artist. If you have the power, the personal power, that you can lift any substance and imbue it with the quality of the maker. And that says a mouthful, because the quality of the maker takes us into the fields of qualities of consciousness. And see, what could I say? A clear, C-L-E-A-R, clearer aspects of self. So you can see as I'm moving, well, I'm a little speeded up here still, but I'm moving a little faster. I'm liking where the painting's going. Now, this was the beginning of COVID, so you see the crosses. Well, I've never worked with crosses before. This was also a template I had of crosses, and what was moving in my heart was well, you know what we all went through on TV and on Facebook and social media. It was a huge upheaval of fear. And one of the things about concentrating or focusing on the Sophia at a time like this, it's very centering. It's stabilizing. It's enduring. It's quiet. And with so much fear that happened, I was quite astounded actually at the amount of fear, which there were all kinds of reasons for that fear, but a lot of it was just personal fear of death. People hadn't really faced their fear of death. And I've said this in many of my podcasts that the first arc of a dreamer is they have to face the fear of death, because the first time you leave your body consciously, say in a lucid dream, you're facing your fear of death. You know, where are you? So it's the first gate of dreaming, I call it. So I was raised, you know, on the qualities of colors. The pink is the color of love. Blue is the color of loyalty and fealty and devotion. Deeper blue is devotion. The deep purples are like what we see when we look at the fields of stars, outer space. So I'm just doing the same thing as I did with the Dr. Martens dyes. I'm using the same colors, but I've added an opaque. So there's sort of a sagey green here. And now I'm adding pink. I'm layering it up because something is moving towards say this being, Sophia, this archetype, wants to arise. So the question is always, how is she going to rise? What's, and the thing is, you can't answer that in your mind if you're an intuitive painter. You're tracking an invisible breadcrumbs. So there is not a white 1 inch band going down the front of the canvas. It's the light is so bright coming through my overhead. I actually sewed it and put it up. I did a canopy overhead, so it's actually green. I didn't want to have a color, but green is cooling. And in the very hot summers we have, I made a executive decision and said the green canvas overhead will not impair my color work that much. But what you see is the brilliant where the canvas doesn't meet, so you have that white. It's the sun so bright shining through. So I have some of the whites you can see out. I have some of the acrylic paints that you can get at Michael's for $1.37. So I just showed you the 140 weight hot press, which is smooth, that I use Dr. Martin's dyes on, and it's dry, and I'm starting to cut out shapes. So it looks like I took the ideal of Sophia, the ideal that is leading me down this painting path is that she has this crown of thought that encircles her head. So I'm cutting leaf-like shapes in different sizes and different colors. And again, this is not planned. I don't make a drawing. I don't count the leaves because that's basically paint by numbers. This is much more freeing. This is contemplative arts. You're just moving in your intuitive work. So there's something very satisfying to work in mixed media. You've got the flat canvas, which is, two-dimensional, and then you start moving into 3 dimensions with adding something to that lifts up off the canvas, not only in the thickness of the paper, but also in the colors. So I've really loved exploring mixed media the last 20 or 30 years. And now am able to move easily between all kinds of different medias. At the beginning, I think anyone who starts, will do painting first, and they do abstracts, or they do landscapes, or they do portraits. And we tend to be pretty tight in the beginning. We tend to want to control our picture plane. We want to know what the composition is because we don't trust our skill set. And the thing with intuitive painting, the primary tool is to drop what you think you know, because we all know what we know, right? And we have tricks. Every artist, especially if they've been in the design field, and I've been a designer, has certain tricks that they can use to make something beautiful. And beauty is beautiful, but it's also a temptation. And perhaps there's something in the painting or the drawing or the sculpture or the jewelry or, whatever the art media wants to have a slightly different energy. And so this is where the heart of the artist, and we're not talking about the head, we're talking about the heart of the artist, has a function that's never talked about really in the arts, because we all talk about intuition, which is sort of like our head. But really the heart is an organ of cognition. I'll say that again. The heart, our heart, is an organ of cognition. Oh, I'm going back to a book I read years and years ago about heart transplant patients. And the patients would be all sitting in their wheelchairs waiting to see the docs, so they'd all talk to each other. And these heart transplant patients would start talking and asking questions of other heart transplant patients. And they'd say, my heart talks to me. It's not the heart that I had before because they had a heart transplant. And it's telling me different things. And then the person next to them, a man or a woman, my heart's talking to me too. And it's not the kind of talking that my other heart did. So it came about that all these heart transplant patients had hearts that were talking to them. Different speech than what they had before, with the heart that had been transplanted, bringing something new to the entity, which should be us, the physical body. So this is a wonderful topic to think about, the heart of the artist. And the heart of the artist is imbued with our feelings and our willing and our thinking. We're not just one thing. We think thoughts about our work, we feel into what wants to come, and we act. We have to say, yes, I'm going to do this. No, I'm not going to do that. I've got to edit, because what wants to come through is more important than this pretty thing here, that pretty thing here. And gosh, don't they look so good next to each other? So I'm just looking at the surface. It's quite beautiful, I have to say, even now. Wow. That's a lovely landscape to bring a Sophionic being into. Look at how the crosses are dissolving in the distance. They're sort of emerging and then they're dissolving. And they don't take up the whole picture plane. Oh, that's a slice. That's not the entire canvas. That's why you see it so vertical. But look at how the words sort of emerge, the scribble effect. So it's this lovely metaphor of speech, of thinking. And what do I have now? Oh, yes. So one of my tricks, which I'm passing on to you, and I've used it my entire artistic career, is I usually get NuPastel. And I get white NuPastel because typically it's easiest to see, but you can work in different colors depending. And I don't know what color I'm going to work with. And you can sketch out what you want on your canvas if your canvas is dry, and this is dried. This is a dry canvas. Because you can take a sponge and just wipe off what you've done, but it gives you an idea of where you might might be going in what field or what area in the landscape of the canvas. Okay, so I have 3 kinds of glue sticks. I've got Elmer's glue, I've got, I think it's Uru. I'm sitting at my desk here looking. And when you're doing collage, you want to have plenty of glue sticks. You can use tacky glue, you can also use all the sort of stickums, which are great, but I use tacky glue to stick it where I want, and then I go over it front and back with the glue stick. So here I'm just starting to place, because I know where the head, the visage, the countenance of the Sophionic being is going to go. But again, I'm just moving intuitively. And so you're working in 2 worlds. You're working sort of in this mystic place, this state of sort of strengthened artistic will, sort of a gentle will. But you also have to have a couple of feet on the ground too, because you're creating something in the real world, and you've got to handle the glue stick. You've got to handle if it's not working. You've got to handle if you need a different kind of glue because it needs to be stronger. So you're working between these worlds of deep intuition, but also groundedness as an artist, and knowing your tools and your services and the challenges that come with it, and being prepared. And what artist is ever prepared? It's always something new. I loved that hat. That was my favorite hat. I left it at the pool though, and somebody nabbed it. They're in Santa Barbara, very happy with that hat. It totally crumples up. It's called a ribbon hat. And you can just crumple it up and stick it in your purse. Okay, so you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm working on those. There they are. This is Uru, I think, the big yellow. And what frustrates me most is not having the tools. And I think every artist knows that frustration. Having plenty of the glue, or having plenty of the paint, or having plenty of the brushes, or having the different kinds of brush tips and liner brushes, fan brushes, thin brushes, thick brushes, stubble brushes, stump brushes. And here I have the medium, which I'm using as a final layer over everything. So those brushes that I'm using are the very inexpensive ones. They're like, 60 cents, 80 cents. And I just get them by like 20 or 10, all in various sizes and shapes, because they come small, long, and broad. And I use them for everything. They just take a beating. You just got to be aware that the hairs fall out. So you should scruffle your brush and pull the hairs before you start. But it's sort of a trade-off. So now I'm filling in the crowns, and it's kind of satisfying every placement of the leaf around her head that will be there. At least it's like you're getting somewhere in the painting, saying, yes, this is going there. This is going there. Looks like I shot this with my iPhone. And now I'm going to speed up the work until we get to more of the second or third aspect of the painting. So I have the circumference around her head. I've got the crown placed. I think I used Mod Podge, Yuru, and Elmer's glue sticks. And I have different sizes. So I'm now taking like little tiny, they would be like little light rays, but they're color, and they're going to be interspersed between the big leaf shapes. It adds interest, and it breaks up the same shape over and over again. So what you can't see is I'm cutting them out. And some colors I like, some colors I don't, but I've got all those colors that I painted. So one of the things about rhythm and size and shape and color and intensity, it can get a bit overwhelming, but if you're just looking and you squint, and this was my wonderful teacher, Carlisle Cooper, who was the first artist who got the Tarzan cartoon. And he used to walk around us in our easels in drawing and composition, color and design, and the painting class. And he'd say, squint and compare. Squint and compare. It was his mantra, squint and compare. And actually, if you do squint and you compare your lights and darks, and you can measure with your eyes where you're putting things and what space might need something. Because color, of course, clouds our vision. It's so pretty, we just get lost in it. But if we're looking at the composition, we need to be a bit more skilled in our seeing. So squint and compare. So we have this lovely field now, and that's 140 weight watercolor paper, so it's got a rigidity to it, and it wants to bounce off sometimes. You've got to really lay it down. You know, there's a time, we all know this as artists, where you're just beginning to realize that maybe it's going to be a successful painting or a successful endeavor or a road that you've never taken before, and you're on a journey that's just exciting and delightful, and it's a little awe-inspiring, and you're not even sure it's you that's doing it. And that was about what was happening here. You know, making the decision to lay those aspects of a flaming head or crowning glory, or the wisdom emanating from her head, these leaf shapes, brought me to the next step where I could see further down the intuitive line that I was tracking here. And again, you know, I could have made this really fast, sped it up to like 8x, and you'd be out of here in 10 minutes. But I think it's really soothing to watch somebody work. And there's a number of artists I follow on YouTube, and I turn the sound off and I have it on. And, you know, I clean house or I'm working in the studio, and it's really nice to watch another artist work. And these are some close ups, some detail shots moving around the canvas. So now I have to focus on the face. And now you're going to see these are the same. They're watercolor. That's a mouth, that's an eye, and I'm using colored pencils, and I'm using Posca pens, charcoal, and ink. And I don't know how I'm going to do the face. What the idea is that it's Sophia emerging. And Sophia isn't a three-dimensional heavy being. She is an aspect of higher consciousness. She's a field of consciousness. She's a flaming light that can dwell in our head or our heart. So there's the first one. This was just the idea. So I have a full nose. I think the chin is a little heavy here, but it gives me an idea. Am I going to keep the nose? Am I going to keep the bridge of the nose? Am I going to make it a shape? And this is what I did. I finally reached a point where I had to go darker, and I took it outside, and I did not videotape this. I needed to just be alone and work that canvas. And so there's brayer work, there's all kinds of scrapers and sponges. And what I did to the leaves is I took Frisket and I went over all the leaves with Frisket, and then I did the painting, this full-on dark painting. Look at those layers. And then when it was dry, I peeled the Frisket. The Frisket, you just rub the leaves and it peels off. So all the original color on those first leaves came back. And what you're seeing now is the fabulous breakthrough. This was a real breakthrough for me. I just went, I had to go dark. And here is the Frisket peeled off those leaf shapes, which was really extraordinary for the brilliance of color. So this is the upside down. Here she's right side up. And there's different eyes, different eyebrows, different lips, different noses that I use. And you can see some blue tape. That's that wonderful artist tape that's blue. And it sticks, but it doesn't tear or pull up anything off your canvas. So I would set this in my studio for hours and just look at it. Take a nose off, try a different kind of nose, different eyes, different lights, different colors. But I entered a field in this third step of the painting where I wanted the feeling that she is arising out of a tremendous movement and spaciousness. Because we're dealing with space and time and being. So we're dealing with space and time and being. There's some nice close-up detail. I could not get that nose to lay down, and I knew I'd have to glue it, glue it, glue it. I didn't know if I liked the bridge, if I just wanted the base of the nose or the top of the nose. There's some nice detail shots there. So what we have sealed, we have the crown over her head is sealed. That's completely down now. What we're working with now is it's all been fixed and with a medium, but now we're working on what is going to happen with the face. How much form is the face going to have? You just saw a shot of the Guardian of the Threshold, another painting I have behind it, which is on the wall next to my bookshelf. So this is the NuPastel in white, and I can draw in shapes or forms, darkness or light with pastel, and it just washes off because this has all been sealed now. So I'm not afraid of destroying anything. I'm just placing things. Do I like it here? If the shapes aren't big enough, because so much is going on in that canvas, they won't sort of solidify into a face. So you have to, cut things down or repeat them and make them again, because they have to be solid enough now to hold the eye that there's actually something arising out of what looks like chaos. If I remember correctly, that nose gives me some trouble down the line. I think I have to cut it off at the bridge. So this is just layers and layers and layers and layers. I am showing you the medium that I use. And this is the final face. I've cut the bridge of the nose. There it is. There's the I Am Sophia. This is out in the back so I could get full color. Her face. And some detail shots. So thanks for watching. Please sign up at Christina West Art if you want to listen to my podcasts or my art or my next session. Thanks so much. Let's get creative.